Next we have Mike Chase here from dinCloud. He's going to talk a little bit. After Mike speaks, we'll take some questions from the audience. You can ask these guys some questions about how they do what they do.
All right. Thanks, Ken. Clicker going here. Okay. So thanks for having me today. I'm Mike Chase. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for dinCloud. Prior to going into cloud, I was running the professional services organization for quite a few national bars with international operations. And when I left that team, I took some of the brightest guys that worked for me for the last 3 or 4 companies and went into cloud. And so one of the takeaways that kind of differentiates dinCloud, and this is one of the reasons why, if anybody went to the Goldman Sachs Cloud Computing Conference May of this year in Menlo Park, we were one of only 3 cloud provider logos on the screen with Amazon, Rackspace, and then dinCloud. Is we're the first and only cloud provider in the world that's offering everything in the cloud that you have in your data center. So we host servers, we do cloud storage, those 2 things. We have a lot of competitors on, including Amazon and Rackspace. But the gem of the empire is virtual desktops. And that's a very unique workload, and we'll talk about that and focus on that today. But we also host applications, and then if any of you are running Cisco phone systems, we also have a hosted collaboration solution so you can run your Cisco phone system virtualized in the cloud. And of course that eliminates a lot of cost and complexity because you don't have to have PRIs and move to SIP trunks. You get away from the cost analog lines and so on. And then we offer mobility. So all of the services that we have work on Windows devices, Android devices, iPad, Mac Airbook, Linux, pretty much any device that's out there. And in fact, I actually brought a couple of props today. So it might be hard to see up here, but I always ask people, what is this, right? And a lot of people, they'll see me in the airport kind of using this, and they'll look and say, oh, this guy's got a netbook with Windows. Not very sexy. Then I'll start poking the screen because it's touchscreen. And I'm like, wow, this guy's got a netbook with a touchscreen. That's even weirder. And then what I'll do is I'll hit the button, and they'll say, wow, this guy's using Android. He's got Windows too. What the heck's going on with this guy? And then by the time I get around to doing this, where I actually pull the screen completely off the device, then they have to ask, right? But these are the things that you can do with virtual desktop, and that's what makes it sexy. Because at the end of the day, people want to bring any device. Bring your own IT doesn't mean anything unless you can actually use it. And a lot of CIOs were very cautious because they didn't want to have to buy all this mobile security stuff at the edge and figure out what the security pluses and minuses were for each device. But I am kind of one of those weird customers. Even when I bought Xsigo, Xsigo had to ask me exactly, well, what are you doing with it? Because I don't have cable mesh. And to do some of the high-performance workloads that we do, particularly around virtual desktop and also some new stuff we're doing with high-performance computing, we don't use fiber channel. In fact, we can't use fiber channel. I've got 21 certs in a law degree, which I don't know exactly. My CIO gave me the nickname Dr. Cloud, by the way. So the history of that, I don't know if it's because of my last name and somebody watched too many reruns of Spies Like Us with Chevy Chase where they go into the tent and he's like, doctor, doctor, doctor. Or if it was the Juris Doctor of Law degree, but somehow I got tagged with that name, and they've actually got one of those psychiatrist couches outside my office so people lay down there and tell me their cloud problems. But in either event, they kind of came to me and said, well, what are you doing? You're not, and even my own guys, when I made the architecture decision, they said, what are you doing? You don't have fiber channels, so you're not trying to get rid of a lot of cables, you're not trying to consolidate that side of the I/O. But I'll tell you this, if you're a cloud provider, there is no cloud provider on earth right now, worth his salt anyway, who is not running InfiniBand. If you're not running Xsigo, you're not running cloud. So if you guys bought into the theme this year of your cloud, own it, you're going to have to own some Xsigo, bottom line. There's a couple reasons for this. In the hypervisor, you will not have to reboot when you provision or deprovision any type of I/O. That's amazing. The second thing is you can get up and running very quickly because you have profiles. So as you know, you have to set up NICs for vMotion and NICs for console management and all this stuff, and then the NICs to connect to your VM networks. You can do that instantly with one profile, and you can have many different profiles for different environments that you have virtualized and lay that down on the server instantly. The other reason is extremely low latency, which is absolutely critical. You actually see storage systems, and me and some other guys who use Xsigo are pushing NetApp and others, but there's storage systems today, even from NetApp, but that's the Ingenio product line, that use InfiniBand. And it's for the extremely high speed and the low latency. So I'm actually using the QDR 40 gigabit per second. And then the security of it. How many people have heard Cisco say that VLANs aren't secure, right? Okay, well, InfiniBand is secure. It's a lot more secure than Ethernet. So you get all these advantages. You get faster speed, you get lower latency, you get better security, you get the ability to provision and deprovision I/O into thousands of servers, maybe you only have a few hundred, but even if it's 10, it's going to save you an enormous amount of time without all the hassle. So those are the reasons why I use InfiniBand, and we've got a little bit of a different case. So here's the architecture that really is my cloud. Now, originally when I started off, and just so you know, to kind of give you the punchline, our virtual desktop solution does not use VMware, it doesn't use Citrix. Now, being a huge partner with all of these companies worldwide, we thought we were going to go down that path. And of course, if you guys have tried to use VMware over WAN, or Citrix does a little better, but it's also very, very complex. It doesn't really work. So our solution is actually built with Microsoft. We're one of the 13 Microsoft LARs, or large account resellers in the United States. So moving your licensing to the cloud is very complex. If the cloud provider tells you, oh, just use what you have, you're wrong, right? And Microsoft will come at you next year and say, oh, you're using that in the cloud? Well, you're supposed to buy this, you're supposed to buy that. Particularly if you're familiar with desktops, they'll start talking to you about software assurance and BDA. It gets to be a little bit of a nightmare. Or how to move your enterprise agreement over to the cloud. We can do that for you. We've got some very deep connections. But we built this solution with Microsoft because at the end of the day, when you're looking at a virtual desktop, you have to ask yourself, who owns the desktop? Love them or hate them, Microsoft. So what we did is, it's a very unique desktop. It works on all these devices, but it can work at twice the error rate of View and Citrix. They actually, if you test them in the lab, they'll die at about 1% errors. We can also work at extremely low bandwidth. I've got people, it's deployed in over 5 countries, but we do business in India, China, Pakistan, and 20 offices in the US, and it works great. A lot of times I'm using it just like I was today, actually, when I was logged in here over the wireless here, and it's not exactly stellar. I'll use it over my 3G or 4G phone as well, from thousands of miles away. But what we're able to do, we're kind of like BASF. We don't make a lot of the products you buy, but we make all the products you buy better. So we're able to optimize the RDP protocol without rewriting it. Some of you are familiar with Blaze Ericon, they actually rewrote it, did some tossing and queuing and other things. We actually optimize everything on Windows 7 desktop so that on simple protocols like RDP, you can actually surf YouTube videos at 1080p over WAN with full resolution, full screen, and up to 6 monitors. This is unprecedented as far as virtual desktops are concerned. But this is the architecture. Almost every cloud provider today has adopted this architecture. So we don't use blade systems. I think with all the bling that they give out here at VMworld, one of the things they should give out is a calculator. And I'll give you an example with blade systems. Pick on HP in particular, because a lot of enterprises buy them. The C7000, it's a 10U box, so if you got a 42U rack, you can get 4 of those into a rack. Each one of those has 3 30-amp circuits, 208 volt coming out of the back. Most of the colos you're going to talk to, if you're using a 30-amp circuit at 208 volt, they're going to charge about $750 a piece for the circuit. They're going to charge about $1,000 for the rack, sometimes a little more, but average price about $1,000 in the United States per month. So if you get 4 of these chassis with 3 of these circuits at $750 a piece in there, you got 12 circuits, it's $9,000 a month on electricity, $1,000 a month for the rack. You got a $10,000 rack, you haven't even done anything with it yet. Also, when you start off like I did, you get these guys who have these multiple certifications, because to do desktop, we had to solve 65 major problems in order to get there, and I'll talk about how that fits into the infrastructure and how Xsigo helps us solve some of these problems. The other thing that I think you'll find really interesting is we tested 427 zero and thin clients. How many of those do you think can serve YouTube? 2. How many can do it without being very, very, very choppy? None of them. How many can do it full screen? None of them. 427. We literally went to every site that VMware Citrix had anybody. We sent people overseas to Asia, went through every factory, couldn't find a single thing. What we found out actually was interesting after dissecting a couple of these, was that they're actually made by a couple of manufacturers overseas, and there's everybody's software on top. But none of them could do simple stuff like that. So by the way, we did hook up with Acer, Lenovo, and some other companies and manufacture our own that can power 2 monitors out of the box. It's less than $300. But let's look at the architecture. Because the blade systems were so expensive, this is why we give away calculators at these events. Whoever told you you're going to save on power, space, and cooling must have been crazy. We use 2U servers, and there's a couple of reasons for that, because you guys have probably read the news, you see a couple of cloud providers go down here and there, which is why I kind of had to smile when I saw the theme this year, like, do you really want to own cloud? It's a dangerous business to be in. You're hosting people's entire business. I've got really large enterprise customers and multinationals around the world, and my partner here, he'll tell you the same thing. It's a little scary. That's what keeps us up at night. This is why we pick Xsigo. This is why we pick rock solid systems, and buying your typical enterprise gear is not going to get you there in cloud. And you don't want to wake up one day. I've got little doctor's offices where they literally have all their phones, all their servers, and all their desktops in our cloud. And they're logging in from all over the world. Little doctor's office, 20 user doctor office, SMBs, their whole business is in the cloud. When Amazon went down for 4 days, then came back up, and people were screaming, I want out of your cloud. It was hard enough to get in the cloud, right? Because they were using AMI, which is not exactly VMDK. It's not VMware friendly. You go to Blue Lock, you go to us, you go to certain partners, you can actually transfer over to the cloud very easily. But at this point, people were pissed, and they were like, hey, I want out of your cloud. How do I get out? Right? And that was a big issue too. So getting in and out of cloud's a little bit difficult. But when you look at the architecture, we use 2U servers. And these 2U servers are actually manufactured by Supermicro. I've got Charles Lang, who's the CEO of that company, coming to our dinCloud coalition. And I'll talk about that for a second. When you look out on the floor and you see all these booths, you see Quest Software, you see Trend Micro, all these guys are coming to our event on the 20th. So Eva Chen, who's the CEO of Trend Micro, actually lives about 20 miles from our headquarters in Los Angeles, where I'm from. Doug Dorn, who's the CEO of Quest Software. And you guys are walking through, and it's kind of like a candy shop, right? You've got a limited budget, and you're sitting there going, man, which one do I buy? Can I afford this? Can I afford this? In our cloud, by the way, you can get all of those products from 23 vendors, 23 major vendors that are sitting out on that floor for $65 per user per month. And we can build it in your data center, because some of the government and the other customers I deal with do not want it for regulatory and other purposes out of their data center, or I can build it in mine. You're probably going to do both. If you look on Computer Technology Review, I wrote an article about cloud, and I think you guys should read it. It's the 10 major things that you should be looking for and asking, but you're probably going to go with a hybrid cloud, to be honest with you. You're going to build some stuff in your data center, and you're probably going to put the rest into a public cloud to get the BCDR. So we use 2U servers. These 2U servers have 4 CPUs, 12 cores each. It's pretty much a monster. And I was speaking at the AMD booth yesterday, and they were all excited, because when you make the connection of how these technologies get used, it's real simple. If you look in the middle here, a lot of clouds are a little too much iron. People won't give up. I'm a CCIE, I get it. But people won't give up their Cisco firewall, their F5 load balancer. You have to give those up. From day one when we built the cloud, we said all virtual appliances all the way through, right? And this is where Xsigo really shines, again, with those profiles, because when you've got all these interfaces that you've got to hook into your network in the cloud, it's very easy to provision those and deprovision those without having to take servers down. Customers don't like downtime in the cloud. It's not like corporate IT. I mean, you try to negotiate, let's say 5 minutes in corporate IT, it's still pretty tough, but you usually get it on a weekend or late night at 3 in the morning when everybody's asleep. In cloud, they're like, you want a what? No way, right? So you got to have 100% uptime. And these servers are not only powerful, but they have 512 gigs of memory. A lot of the blade systems you'll see max out at 256 plus the MMUs. I talk like this because I used to work for Broadcom, but at the end of the day, the memory management units will downgrade in their speed. You can't access as much of that memory as quickly as possible. But once you have a server that has 4 CPU, 12 cores each, and 512 gigs of memory, which, by the way, running Windows 7 32-bit, we can get 170 users. So if you take 512 divided by 3, you get 170 users per server. So on 8 racks, I'm running 28,000 desktops for users all around the world. How do you get that much I/O off of a server? Xsigo. How do you keep it secure? Xsigo. How do you make sure that you can transfer stuff around very, very quickly? Xsigo. How do you do vMotion? I was reading a slide the other day, I think, that VMware was showing on vSphere 5, and they were saying, obviously, and it pretty much translated. It went from 1 gig to 10 gig. The speed increased, 4x like you would expect. And I think they were talking about 64 gig memory server. You could transfer VM in 51 seconds or something like that. So doesn't it make sense then, instead of 51 seconds, if I could cut that down to a quarter of that time by doing it at 40 gigabit per second QDR and InfiniBand? Doesn't that make sense? Made a lot of sense to me. Plus, when I started this off, I was using Cisco Nexus 7000 series switches. I started off going on cloud, I'm big cloud, I'm gonna buy big gear. I did. It cost me a fortune. I ended up donating it to some of my customers. They thought it was Christmas, and 6 months later they came back and asked me to put everything in the cloud because it was too expensive for them. The thing was sucking them dry on all the 430 amp circuits coming out of the back, so I had to chuckle. But the only way to get 170 users, who, by the way, are used to having at least a 1 gig connection out of there, is to have Xsigo with the InfiniBand. So we've got 2 of the 40 gig per second QDR interfaces in the back, and that offloads the traffic into the directors and then up to the switches. And we've kind of gone Arista networks on that, although we do use some Cisco Nexus 5548s. But those are very small switches, and it really cut my 10 gig footprint. And that's why I spend so much time, by the way, advocating with NetApp, go InfiniBand, go InfiniBand, go InfiniBand. They're starting to listen. But today, we aggregate multiple 10 gig links, and then we also use jumbo frames, so your byte size when you're talking NFS goes from 1,500 bytes to 9,000 bytes and allows really lightning fast transfers. Also with the NetApp, you get about 1 terabyte to 3 terabytes of cache on the front end, so this is how you eliminate all the boot storms and everything else. Now when you look at VMware View and Citrix, even though they still don't work, they keep piling on. I used to joke with Citrix, it was their CTO called me the other day, and we were joking around. I said, hey, you guys are kind of like, you go to the cemetery, it's like, Igor, give me another 4 legs and 3 arms and another eyeball. I mean, every time they think they're missing a technology, they go down and throw something back in. It doesn't really work, but you have to do NFS. This is another thing. You got InfiniBand. These are all the components that make cloud work. Why NFS? Well, for anybody who's a VCP in the room, I am as well, one of the things you learn is, and this is one of the big mistakes you make, is you keep thinking, well, I love VMware, 89% of the market runs VMware, I'm just going to add desktop to it. Eventually VMware will get it right, Citrix will get it right. And when they do, I'm just going to add it. Wrong. First problem is if you run fiber channel iSCSI, you're never going to run desktop. Why? How many virtual machines can you get on one line? 64. If you're going to run 28,000 desktops, or millions, how many runs is that? Right? So this is why we end up using NFS and jumbo frames and aggregate 10 gig links. Eventually, if these guys catch on, they're going to go InfiniBand. They're starting to make some calls over to Xsigo, so they're getting smart. But that's kind of the architecture. The other thing is all virtual appliances. So when the cloud has to move, all your firewalls, all your load balancers, all your WAN accelerators, everything else in the cloud has to move with it. So we use VIAT firewalls and other things that are all virtual. It's all virtual appliances. And having our own BGP ASN and owning all these thousands of public IP addresses on the internet, if I want to move you from LA to New York to Singapore, all I have to do is re-advertise that portion of my block that's assigned to you as my customer out this other location. Everything on the internet shifts, starts coming through that other location. I've already replicated your entire virtual private data center over, and what do I have to do next? Do I have to change DNS? No. Most people that change DNS screw it up anyway, because the time to live default in many cases is 7,200 seconds, and they're wondering for 2 hours why it still didn't fail over, right? You got to dumb those down to 300 seconds if you want it done in 5 minutes. But I don't have to do that because the IPs didn't change. So no DNS changes. Do I have to change the firewall? No, it's virtual. Same firewall, dedicated to each customer. Again, that's a heck of a lot more secure. No shared components in the cloud. And I don't have to change the network address translations either. So I can still be using private addressing. In fact, we're one of the few cloud providers we allow you to use what you tell us what addressing you're going to use, because it literally is an extension of your data center. Even when it's in our cloud, everything fails over very, very easily. But the other thing too, which was mentioned earlier on stage, is it does future-proof you. I mean, in the end, I knew that I wasn't going to be running, fiber channel and some of these other things. But who knows, right? I mean, the reason why these, storage companies get billion-dollar valuations like 3PAR and Compellant, actually I had dinner with Phil Soren a few months before he was bought by Dell, is because they're doing wonderful things in the cloud, in virtualization. So it used to be like with EMC and other companies, you would buy 100 terabytes of storage, you would lose 40% to overhead. Now with 3PAR, that's down to as little as 4%. So there's an incentive for me, potentially to go use some of these systems, right? Maybe for cloud storage, maybe for other things. But I have that option with Xsigo because I'm not locked in. All my I/O is virtualized. Everything's virtualized end to end in the cloud. So essentially here we're running the servers. We've got everything tied to the Xsigo. The NetApp is tied up through, and then that's communicating across the Xsigo. And with the private virtual interconnect, we can do a whole lot of things. vMotion is a great use of this PVI, Private Virtual Interconnect, where the servers can talk to each other directly over InfiniBand. Because what happens today is you actually cross the InfiniBand, hit an Ethernet port, and do a hairpin turn and come back. So now I don't have to do that anymore. If anybody's running really high-end databases, SQL, Hadoop, these kind of things, perfect reason to run Xsigo. And then, of course, when you've got virtual appliances with so many interfaces, and again, this is why we use the high-end AMD processors in the cloud. Those are the ones that give you the 12 cores each. They scale infinitely when under attack. One of the things I used to hate was, when your Cisco firewall or F5 load balancer is under attack, denial of service or whatnot, and it runs out of resources, it runs out of memory, it runs out of whatever. I don't have those problems in the cloud because I can scale up, and the odds of overcoming my Xsigo infrastructure is pretty low at 40 gigs. But here's the cool thing. If I've got to bring a bunch more servers online to scale up against the attack, I can do it very, very quickly. Literally rack it, bring it up, apply the profile from Xsigo. All my many network ports are there. And of course VMware likes everything redundant, so normally that would be a lot of cables. I can instantly apply it, and I'm instantly up. And cost-wise, it cut my cost tremendously. I mean, I was looking at, gee, how many 10 gig ports, and then of course, when it goes to 40 gig Ethernet, what do? Am I literally gonna say, oh, hey, sorry, cloud customers, I gotta take, 2,000 servers down at my underground LAX data center, and why don't you just hang on for a sec while I swap these Ethernet adapters out? I don't think so. Today, I told it that it's got, X number of 1 gig connectors for the management ports and X number of 10 gig connectors, but I can easily go back tomorrow and say, hey, 240 gigs, or carve it up any way I want. And this is huge, because when you look at a lot of blade systems, they'll tell you, like with HP Virtual Connect, that you're getting 10 gig out of the back. Take a look at one of those cards. It's 10 gig total, even though you've got multiple 10 gig ports. And if you're really crafty, you can actually have 2 of those Virtual Connect cards and use 10 gig over here and 10 gig over here, but you're still limited to 20 gig, right? So it's not very future-proof, and it's also very, very expensive. So Xsigo, again, to reiterate, low latency, really high speed, much better security, because VLANs aren't secure, but InfiniBand is actually authenticated in the media, so that's kind of nice. And then you can apply other things, I didn't even get into QoS and some of the other things, but then the very quick provisioning and deprovisioning that you get in the cloud. Another thing is, this was important to us because we build this anywhere. Again, we can build it in your data center. If we build it even when we're doing desktops, which are $65 per user per month, and think about that price for a minute. If you go buy a laptop for $1,000 and split it over 36 months, that's $27 per user per month for those 36 months. You haven't even done anything to it yet. And I've got all of the Trend Micro products in there. I've got all of the Quest software products in there. I've got all the stuff that you guys are out there kind of sitting there with your limited budget, cruising around these hundreds of booths going, I don't know, should I spend money over here? Should I spend money over there? I've got it all in the cloud already. User metrics, which is Eternity and Firescope, and a lot of these other things that are in the product. If you go to Google News and look at the press releases we've got, you'll see a lot of interesting stuff in there. And I've learned to kind of not give out the whole secret sauce. There's 23 vendors in the dinCloud coalition. And one of them, we did you hear a lot of myths here about, virtual desktop. We used to hear a lot of myths too about WAN acceleration. People would tell you, oh, you can't move traffic that's encrypted, or you can't move traffic that's a media file or already compressed. We did. There was a press release we did for CIS Hollywood where we moved exactly those 3 types of traffic from LA to New York to Vancouver, and at the end of the day, did it at 12x speeds. And of course, EMC is not stupid. They went in 2 weeks later and bought the company. So you can't even see SNK.com anymore. So I try to keep some of the secret sauce secret. But when it comes to cloud management, a couple things you should know about us. We're hypervisor agnostic. So today we work with VMware. I'm not sure I really like the new licensing that came out. I don't know about you guys. But I can work with Hyper-V. I can work with KVM, Zen, and VirtualBox as well. So we're totally agnostic. The other thing is, if we drop one of these appliances in your data center, it'll hook to vCenter, it'll hook to SCCM, any of the hypervisors you've got, and immediately start managing your environment. The other thing is that it all ties to one pane of glass. Kind of a corny thing to say, but yes, one pane of glass. So all of these communicate over SSL on the internet and tie that data center and this data center, mine, yours, theirs, together into one pane of glass, and you can see all those data centers. And it also has drag and drop conversion. You can almost call it conversion vMotion between all these hypervisors, as well as using the OVF template to store all the templates, or the OVF format to store all the templates. So when you deploy, Windows Server 2008 or any of these other things, you can do it onto any of the hypervisors directly from one template. You don't have to have different templates for each hypervisor, which is kind of cool. So very agnostic, works very, very well. And then of course, this is a picture of our desktop. So you can literally go onto it, surf YouTube, full screen, 1080p, up to 6 monitors. The endpoint device, you can use anything you want. But if you do want to buy an endpoint device, for us, if you buy quantity 5,000, they're $268. Quantity one's like $332. We just sell it to you at cost. We don't make any money on it. But it works at high resolution, low bandwidth. None of this would be possible without InfiniBand. As you know, every time you click something on your desktop, what happens with Windows? It goes and accesses the disk. It goes and does this. It wants resources. So we're able to do that because of the low latency in InfiniBand. If it wasn't for that, it wouldn't happen. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. If you guys want to get a hold of me, my email address is mchase@dincloud, dincloud.com. And I appreciate your time. Have a great time at VMworld.